I buried my wife on a Tuesday in November, and the ground was so cold they had to use a machine to break through the first few inches of soil. I remember standing there thinking that Marion would have hated that sound. She always said she wanted to go quietly. And she did. It was the noise that came after her that I never expected. She was 63. Too young, the doctor said, as if the number made it more tragic than it already was. 41 years we had been married. I learned how to make coffee strong enough to drink only because she liked it that way. And somewhere along the way, I forgot I ever liked it weak. I still make it strong now. Some habits don't break just because the reason for them is gone. My son was there at the funeral, of course. He stood beside me the whole time, one hand on my shoulder. And when the pastor said the final words and the casket began to lower, my son squeezed my arm and said, "I've got you, Dad." I believed him. That was the first mistake I made, but I don't think I should be blamed for it. A man standing over his wife's grave is not thinking clearly. A man standing over his wife's grave is thinking about coffee and cold ground and the sound of a machine breaking through frozen earth. His name is Daniel. He was always the practical one, even as a boy. When his younger sister cried over scraped knees, Daniel would already be looking for the bandages. When the family car broke down on a road trip to the Smokies in 1998, Daniel was 12 years old, and he stood on the shoulder reading the owner's manual like it was a comic book. I was proud of that. I told myself I had raised a capable man. He called me 3 weeks after Marion's funeral. Not to check in, not to ask how I was sleeping, though I wasn't sleeping, but to talk about what he called getting things organized. He said it gently. He always spoke gently. That was something I should have paid more attention to. "Dad, you've got the house, the accounts, the investment portfolio. Marion handled all of that. You shouldn't have to learn it from scratch. Let me help." I was sitting in the kitchen when he said this. Marion's reading glasses were still on the windowsill because I hadn't moved them. I told myself I would move them eventually. "I appreciate that," I told him. "I'm serious, Dad. Let me come over this weekend. We'll sit down together. I'll look at everything. Make sure it's all in order. You shouldn't have to worry about any of it right now." About offertan you not a Cummins. He came on a Saturday. He brought his wife, Patricia, and she made herself useful in the kitchen while Daniel and I sat at the dining room table with folders and statements spread out between us. Patricia kept refilling my coffee without being asked. She had a way of moving through someone else's house like she already owned it. I noticed that. I filed it away somewhere and forgot to look at it again for a long time. Daniel was organized. I'll give him that. He went through everything methodically, the checking account, the savings, the small brokerage account Marion and I had been adding to for 20-something years. He nodded at each statement, made small notes in a pocket notebook he had brought with him. "This is in good shape," he said. "You've got more than enough to live comfortably, but it's a lot to manage on your own, Dad. Have you thought about adding me to the accounts? Just so I can help if something comes up?" I looked at him across the table. He looked back at me steadily, the way he always did. Daniel didn't look away from things. It was one of the qualities I had always admired in him. "I'll think about it," I said. He didn't push. That was smart of him. Over the following months, he called more than he ever had when Marion was alive. 3, sometimes 4 times a week. He came by on weekends. He offered to drive me to appointments, to help me navigate the online banking system Marion had always managed, to review the quarterly statements from the brokerage. Each time, he mentioned the accounts. Each time, softly, reasonably, he made the same suggestion. "It would just make things easier, Dad. For both of us. I want to be honest about something. I wasn't suspicious. I was lonely. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes after a long marriage ends. A loneliness that has texture and weight, that sits across from you at dinner and rides in the passenger seat of the car. Daniel was filling that space, and part of me was grateful enough not to look too closely at the shape of what he was doing. I added him to the checking account in March. It felt like a reasonable thing to do. He was my son. He was helping me. Marion and I had always planned to leave everything to him and his sister Karen eventually. What difference did it make if he had access now? Karen lived in Portland. We talked every Sunday, and she asked after me in the way people ask after things they love from a distance carefully, with a slight ache underneath the words. She didn't offer to help manage the accounts. She knew I had Daniel nearby. She trusted that. I should tell you about the morning everything changed, because there was a single moment, one ordinary, unremarkable moment, when I began to see things differently. It was a Wednesday in April, about 5 months after Marion's funeral. I was at the pharmacy picking up my blood pressure medication. The pharmacist ran my card and looked at her screen with a small frown. "Sir, this is coming back declined." I handed her a different card. That one worked. I didn't think much of it on the drive home. I assumed I had mixed up the accounts, used the wrong card. When I got inside, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and logged into the checking account. The balance was $412. I sat there for a long time looking at that number. Then I looked at the transaction history. In the previous 6 weeks, there had been transfers regular, unhurried transfers to an account I didn't recognize. They were not small. The smallest was $800. The largest was just over $4,000. Together, they added up to something that made my chest feel strange and hollow, the way a room feels when all the furniture has been removed overnight. I want to tell you that I called Daniel immediately, that I confronted him, that I demanded an explanation. I did not. I closed the laptop. I went and stood at the kitchen window for a while, looking at the yard. Marion had planted a row of hydrangeas along the back fence about 15 years ago. They came back every spring without anyone tending them. I looked at those hydrangeas for a long time. Then I called my neighbor, Walt. Walt was 74 years old, retired from 40 years as a contract attorney, and he had no patience for fools or for paperwork that wasn't in order. He was also, since Marion's death, one of the 2 or 3 people in the world I trusted completely. He came over that afternoon and I showed him the screen. Walt looked at it for a long time without saying anything. Then he sat back and looked at me. "How long has he been on the account?" "Since March." "Any other accounts?" I shook my head. Daniel had asked about the brokerage account. I had not added him to it. I hadn't been able to explain to myself why not at the time. Some instinct I hadn't listened to closely enough. "All right," Walt said. "Don't call him yet. Don't do anything yet. Give me a day." Walt called an old colleague of his, a woman named Elaine who handled elder financial abuse cases. She told Walt what I needed to do. I listened carefully. I had a notebook in front of me, not a small pocket notebook like Daniel's. A legal pad. I wrote everything down. The following morning, I went to the bank. I asked to speak to a manager, not a teller. The manager's name was Kevin, and he was younger than my son, but he sat across from me with the kind of seriousness that the situation warranted, and he did not once make me feel foolish for being in the room. I showed him the transaction history. I asked him to freeze the account, pending review. I asked about the process for removing an authorized user. Kevin told me what I needed. I wrote it down. Then I went to a different bank, one across town that Daniel had never heard me mention, and I opened a new account. I transferred what remained in the old account. It was not a large amount, but it was mine, and moving it felt like picking up something that had fallen out of my hands. I did not remove Daniel from the old account right away. I left it open, with a balance of 0, and I waited. He called on Thursday evening. "Ordinary call? How are you feeling? How's the knee?" Mentioned he might come by Sunday. "That sounds good," I said. He came on Sunday. Patricia came too. She brought a casserole and set it on the counter and asked where I kept the serving spoons in the tone of voice that suggested she had been thinking about where things should be kept. We ate at the kitchen table. Daniel talked about his work, about a project that was going well, about a weekend trip they were planning to the coast. He was comfortable. He was relaxed in the way a person is relaxed when they believe everything is going according to plan. After dinner, Patricia cleared the dishes, and Daniel leaned back in his chair and folded his hands on the table. This was the gesture he made when he was about to say something he had prepared. "Dad, I've been thinking. The investment account, the brokerage. It's not a great time to leave that unmanaged. The market's been unpredictable. I could keep an eye on it if you add me on. Just as a precaution." I looked at him for a moment. He looked back at me steadily, the way he always did. "Let me think about it," I said. He nodded. That same small, patient nod. "I want to tell you about Marion for a moment, because she matters here more than the accounts do." Marion was a woman who believed in giving people room to show you who they were. She said that once about a neighbor we didn't get along with, and I thought she was being naive. I understand it differently now. She wasn't being naive. She was being strategic. She was giving the neighbor exactly enough rope. She just never had to use it. Marion also kept a folder. She never told me about this folder while she was alive, but I found it in the second year after her death while cleaning out the filing cabinet in the study. It was labeled simply with a rubber band. No words on the tab. Inside were copies of our financial documents, our will, the deed to the house, the beneficiary designations on the retirement accounts. All of it updated and organized and dated. The most recent documents on top. She had updated the will 8 months before she was diagnosed. I don't know how she knew to do it then. I don't think she did know. Not consciously. I think Marion was simply the kind of woman who kept things in order because she understood, in some quiet and uncelebrated way, that the world required it. I read through the folder carefully. The will was clear. The house and the majority of the estate were to be split equally between Daniel and Karen. There were specific bequests: her mother's jewelry to Karen, a set of tools to Daniel that had belonged to her father, a small cash gift to the church. I sat with that folder for a long time. Then I called Elaine, the attorney Walt had connected me with. She was direct and efficient, and she treated me like a man who was capable of making decisions, which was exactly what I needed at that point. We met twice in person. She reviewed the documents from Marion's folder, the transaction records I had printed from the bank, and the account statements going back 18 months. "You understand," she said at our second meeting, "that you have options here. You can pursue this legally. You can involve law enforcement, or you can handle it quietly and simply protect what you have left." "I want to protect what I have left," I said. "All right. Then here's what we're going to do." We updated the will. Karen was named primary beneficiary on the retirement accounts. The house, Elaine explained this carefully, and I want to make sure I understood it correctly before I pass it on. The house was placed in a revocable living trust, with Karen and myself as co-trustees. The brokerage account was moved to a new financial institution. New beneficiary designations were filed. All of it legal, all of it clean, all of it done quietly on a Tuesday afternoon, while Daniel was at work and Patricia was wherever Patricia was. I did not feel triumphant doing this. I want to be honest about that too. I felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I felt the particular exhaustion of having to be careful about someone you raised. I thought about Daniel as a 12-year-old boy on the shoulder of a highway in Tennessee, reading an owner's manual in the late afternoon heat. And I didn't feel angry. I felt something lonelier than angry, but I signed the documents, and I drove home, and I made a pot of coffee. Strong, the way Marion liked it. 3 weeks later, Daniel asked again about the brokerage account. We were on the phone. It was a Tuesday evening. "Dad, seriously." I looked into it a little. "There's a simpler platform. I can move it to lower fees, easier to monitor. I just need to be added as an authorized agent." "I already moved it," I said. A pause. Short. "But there. What do you mean?" "I moved the account. Got good advice from Walt's contact. It's handled." Another pause. "I wish you had talked to me first," he said. His voice was still gentle. It was always gentle, but there was something underneath it now. A thin, sharp edge I had not heard before, or perhaps had not been listening for. "I appreciate everything you've done to help," I said. "I've got it from here." He came over that Saturday anyway. Patricia did not come with him this time. He sat at the kitchen table with both hands flat on the surface, and he said, "Dad, I feel like something has shifted between us. Have I done something wrong?" I looked at him for a long time. He was 51 years old. There were lines around his eyes I didn't remember putting there. He looked like a man who had believed in a plan and was watching it come apart without understanding why. "You know," I said, "your mother used to say that trust is like the hydrangeas out back. You can neglect it for a season, and it might still come back. But if you cut it down at the roots, you don't get to decide whether it grows again. He stared at me. I never heard her say that, he said. No, I said. She didn't say it to you. He left not long after. The casserole dish Patricia had left several weeks earlier was still in the cabinet. I put it in a bag by the front door in case she wanted it back. Karen flew in from Portland in June, not because I asked her to, but because she said she wanted to see the hydrangeas. That was the exact reason she gave. She stayed for 10 days. She slept in the guest room and made breakfast every morning and sat with me in the evenings on the back porch without needing to fill the quiet with anything. On the third day, I showed her Elaine's documents. I showed her the transaction records. I told her what I had done and why. She didn't say anything for a while. She sat with her coffee mug in both hands, looking at the yard. "Does he know?" she asked. "He knows something changed. He doesn't know how much." She nodded slowly. "Are you going to tell him?" I thought about that. I had thought about it many times. "He'll find out eventually," I said. "When the time comes." "That's enough." Karen put her hand over mine on the armrest, and we sat there for a while as the evening came down through the trees and the hydrangeas went from purple to gray in the fading light. I want to be clear about something before I finish. I did not hate my son for what he did. Hate requires a kind of energy I was not willing to spend. What I had for him was something quieter and more final. A clear-eyed understanding of who he was, placed next to a clear-eyed understanding of what I still needed to protect. Those two things sat side by side without canceling each other out. That, I think, is what it means to be old enough to know better. Marion would have handled it differently. Marion would have handled it in a way I don't have the grace for. She would have found a way to hold Daniel's better nature up in front of him, like a mirror, until he saw himself and felt ashamed without her ever having to say a word. I am not Marion. I never was. What I could do was sign the papers, change the accounts, move quietly, and keep the lights on in this house that she loved. I still sit at the kitchen table in the mornings. I still make the coffee strong. Marion's reading glasses are still on the windowsill because I decided, sometime in the past year, that they belonged there. Some things you move and some things you don't. On Sunday mornings, Karen calls, and we talk for a long time about nothing in particular. Daniel calls sometimes too. I answer. I keep the conversations light. I do not mention the accounts, and neither does he. And in that silence, there is a kind of honesty that neither one of us would have been able to manage if we had spoken everything out loud. The hydrangeas came back this spring without me doing anything to help them. They always do. I stood at the back window one morning and looked at them and thought about what Marion had said, the things she had said to me. Not to Daniel, because she knew the difference. She always did. The house is quiet in the early morning. I have learned to be comfortable in that quiet, which is not the same as being happy in it, but is something. It is enough. A man who has paid attention to his life long enough knows the difference between enough and more than enough, and knows which one is actually worth protecting. I protected mine. That is all there is to say.